I think most of the time they just would say, well, you just have to eat less, exercise more. I mean, seriously, that was pretty much the only answer that they would have. And they might have had some kind of crazy diet for me to go on, but it was always like, you're obviously eating way too much. And I'd say, no, no, that's not really what's going on. And they would just throw up their hands. I mean, there was never, ever something discussed where it was a metabolism issue, ever. That was never brought up until I started talking to Dr. Cooper, ever.
This is Fat Science, a podcast dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
I'm Dr. Emily Cooper. I've been treating patients with metabolic issues for over 25 years. I'm on a mission to raise awareness about metabolic dysfunction and why diets don't work.
Hi, I'm Andrea Taylor. I've been fat, very fat, chubby, morbidly obese, and done almost every diet ever invented. They all worked until they didn't. I've known Dr. Cooper forever, but when I became her patient and we learned metabolism was the real problem, wow, everything changed, and I've never been healthier.
And I'm Mark Wright. It's time for Fat Science.
Wait, does this podcast make me look fat?
Welcome to Fat Science. I'm Mark Wright, along with Andrea Taylor and Dr. Emily Cooper. It's great to have you both here.
It's fun to be with you too.
Hi.
Okay, on the show today, this is where it gets good. Calories in, calories out. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to talk about diet damage. If you've ever been on a diet in your life, we will explain today why the science says it may have damaged your metabolism. So let's jump in. I think before we jump in, we should explain once again who we are. Dr. Emily Cooper, a leading expert on metabolic dysfunction and metabolic syndrome. Andrea Taylor, former marketing whiz at companies like Turner and Disney, and now a patient of Dr. Cooper and our dear friend, as I am a patient of Dr. Cooper. So let's jump into this. I think, Dr. Cooper, we've all heard this calories in, calories out, and a lot of us have heard it from our own family doctors. The idea that when you eat calories, when you eat food, that you have to burn the calories off or they'll get stored as fat in your body. So it's like a gas tank in a car sort of analogy. But today we're going to talk about why that's actually not true for everyone. So let's start there. Where did calories in, calories out come from?
Well, it makes sense mathematically if you think about it. You put something in, and then that provides energy that you can burn, and you burn that off. So it actually makes sense if you're looking at things from a two-dimensional standpoint. But unfortunately, metabolism isn't two-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional. So when you try to apply that very static formula to real-life metabolism, it doesn't actually add up.
So the last episode, we talked about metabolism and just what metabolism is. And we learned that it's the body's way of converting food to energy that your body can use. Dr. Cooper, I'd love to know, when people go to medical school, what are they taught when it comes to metabolism and the whole calories in, calories out paradigm?
Not much. Hardly anything, actually.
Really?
Yes, really. There's really not much devoted to it. In fact, there's more devoted to just crazy things that, don't normally happen often. I would say that other than the fact that we just went through a pandemic. So we actually did need to learn about pandemics. But there isn't much talk about metabolism or the mechanisms behind obesity and diabetes. And so that's kind of really playing into that simplistic view of calories in, calories out. We can measure the calories in. Calories in is really just a calorie is just really a unit of energy that's provided by food sources. Other things have calories too. It's kind of like if you light a tree on fire, it's a certain amount of heat that's produced, and that can be converted to a calorie equation too, technically. But when it comes to food, we know the content of the food in terms of how many grams it is of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And that can easily be converted to a calorie unit value. We know that. But what we don't account for is in each individual person, the way that that fuel is burned and utilized varies tremendously.
Andrea, I'd love to know from you what doctors have said. And I should have mentioned you and Dr. Cooper go way back to childhood as friends. But in terms of your journey when it comes to dieting, you said in our last episode that you probably went on your first diet at the age of eight or so.
Oh,
What
yeah.
what did the doctors tell you over the years when it came to calories in, calories out?
Don't eat any. Don't don't eat calories. They would say you need to eat usually the magic number honestly was somewhere around 800 to 1,000.
Wow.
And they would
Calories a
have,
day?
yeah,
Oh,
they would say you're eating too many. You should only have, like, they would say that was what I needed to basically live and lose weight to continue. And when you look at what 800 calories a day really is, it's not very much. Um, so, and I would say that they weren't trying to be mean about it, although they were not very nice. And so we would try and make, crazy lunches. Um, like I think I may have said I can slice a piece of bread into 3 pieces. I can make a bagel into 7 pieces. Um, that was what I would have to do for my lunches at school. Um, but there's always a way, and you learn. I mean, I think I was terrible in math, but I probably was really good at calorie math. Like, but you want to do things, and I mean, I still do it even though I know it's bad. Like the other night, I was like, "Oh, look, this vegan creamsicle is 80 calories. Oh, I could have two." Um, like you do all these trade-offs in your head that are terrible.
mhm.
And you know Dr. Cooper has said that even thinking about like dieting messes up your metabolism, just thinking about it. And that is insane to me. But I've pretty much done it for years and years, and it started probably then. But doctors, and then I paid for all kinds of um, liquid. I went on liquid diets in my teens, in college, where I mean, it was less than 800 calories a day. And
Wow.
it was
But
always based in calories, always based in calories.
and when you were only getting 800 or 1,000 calories a day, what did that feel like? Were you just constantly
Terrible,
starving?
terrible.
Yeah.
I was always hungry. I could smell food from like miles away, I think. Like it was
Mm.
terrible. It was
Yeah.
That
terrible. But I mean, I think people thought they were doing the right thing. I don't think they were, torturing me. Well, they knew they were torturing me. But,
Yeah.
you know, and it would work for a while, and then I mean, I couldn't live like that. I would go back to my normal thing, which was never overeating, by the way, ever. Like I never ate. I was never the kid who, ate the whole entire bag of chips or ate
Mhm.
like 5 steaks or 4 hamburger. No, that was
Wow.
not me. Um,
Dr.
yeah,
Cooper,
well,
any
well,
reaction?
unfortunately, the diet you're describing that the doctors put you on is called a very low calorie diet, VLCD. That is the medically supervised diet. That's a medical diet. And that is still prescribed today. That is the
yeah.
definition of it. And so, unfortunately, they put you on a diet that's pretty standard in the medical field.
And the reason that we're talking about both calories in, calories out, and diet damage is because they're just inextricably
Hmm.
linked. As Andrea is describing, even as a young person, Dr. Cooper, that deprivation and how hungry she always was. Let's talk about what's going on in her body as that was happening. What's going on?
Well, as Andrea mentioned, you're so engaged with this diet and counting calories and worrying that you're going over the diet and that you're eating too much of this and not enough of that, that studies have actually shown that that sense of food, what we call it food restraint or eating restraint, that sense of that actually slows your metabolism down. So your brain catching on to the fact that you're actually concerned that you might be eating too much and that you're working so hard to restrain the amount of food that you're eating can shut down the processes in your metabolic pathway to help you conserve energy and store more body fat to protect you from yourself and from your own intentions. So that alone isn't good. And you can imagine years and years of putting your body through this, how the trust in your system, as far as like food availability and food security, it really dissipates. The trust dissipates, and then it becomes even harder to regulate body weight in a normal range.
Wow, that's it, and it makes me just feel sad for young Andrea, who's just trying to
Oh,
get through life, and being hungry all the time in the wealthiest country in the world. It just doesn't seem like it's right. So, what that says to me is that when a doctor puts someone on these low calorie diets, they still have this fundamentally flawed idea that it's like a gas tank in a car. Let's just put less gas in it, and so it can't go as far, it can't burn, it can't get as big, can't get as fat. And it's like it's just doing the opposite,
yeah,
right?
because our body's
Right.
too smart for that. So our body is so smart, it just says, well, you're going to do that to me. I'll just put the brakes on and I'll be able to go a lot further, but I'll just stop burning the fuel.
Dr. Cooper, I'd love for you to talk to maybe a parent out there who has a child who has excess weight. Um, what would you say to that parent? Because I think the natural inclination of a parent who doesn't know about metabolic dysfunction would be to say, well, let's keep Billy from eating this and that, and let's restrict his calories. What would you say to that parent? What do they need to know that they don't know right now?
Well, I would say there's nothing wrong with focusing on a healthy diet. That's good for all of us. It has nothing really to do with our weight and where our weight is. Eating foods that are free of chemical additives is just really good for our health, and getting all the food groups in, it's great. But if your child has an elevated weight, what we don't want to do is turn towards decreasing their energy intake as a means of lowering their weight. Because in the end, what will happen is it will trigger that body weight defense to kick in and their metabolism to slow down. And that could lead to a lifetime of problems that are worse than anything that that child's facing today. So, and if they're an athlete, we really need to make sure that they're fueled just like any other athlete, regardless of the body weight. So we don't alter the food intake based on their body weight. We just make sure they're eating 3 meals and getting their snacks in, supporting their exercise with enough fueling, and trying to then find out what is going on metabolically rather than taking steps to pull away food.
Hmm. Do we know how long this damage can last? If you've been seriously dieting as a child, how long do we know does it last?
Well,
Pretty much forever.
yeah,
I mean, with me, it's pretty much lasted forever. I'm pretty old,
yeah,
so it's still here. I mean, and the whole idea of calories is everywhere. I mean, you pick up any food that you buy, I mean, it's there. It's on the label. It's like you read it as a headline. You can't really get away from
yeah.
it.
And you go to the gym and the equipment is saying you're burning X calories per minute, or your device is saying that. But the funny thing is, people really believe those numbers, and those numbers are not
Well,
accurate, actually. They're,
it's hard
yeah,
to it's hard to get away from it.
right.
I mean, how can you get away from it if you're riding a bike and it's telling you how many calories are going? That's like kind of something that you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I can,
But
you
it's
know.
not based on any like really high tech research. And most of the fitness companies, some of them are better than others, where they actually do test the equipment, and they have all kinds of different size people, different age people run through the equipment while they're actually measuring their caloric expenditure. And then they create formulas that go into the equipment that incorporate that information. But most companies don't do that. And even if they do it, they don't always put the correct formulas in the machines, because the whole thing is that if you find a machine at the gym that tells you you're burning more calories, that's the machine you're going to gravitate to.
Well, wouldn't you?
But it could be burning a lot less than another machine in there that says you're burning, so it's not
Yeah.
accurate to begin with, but people do. It's funny how much people trust that information even though it's not certified, it's not regulated, and it's not accurate.
Dr. Cooper, could you talk about the prom dress example? You know, the one that you always tell me about, the prom dress example of like people who diet
Yes.
and go on restrictive diets to lose like the 10 pounds for their prom
Yes,
dress.
I'm sure many people in the audience could relate to this, but whether it's trying to fit into a prom dress, a wedding dress, or a wrestling outfit, anything that's done in the short term that's a drastic reduction in your energy intake in order to try to reduce your body weight, it's going to come with consequences. So once your body rebalances after that, it doesn't trust the food environment as much anymore. The metabolism is slowed down more. Now your weight will come back not only to where it was before you did that, but up to probably 22% higher is what most studies show. So then you think, oh my goodness, I've got to do that again. So then the next diet to lower your weight in the short term, that comes back with 22% more. So now all of a sudden, a person who really never had a weight problem can have serious obesity over a period of cycling through weight gain, weight loss, more weight gain. So it's really a dead end doing that, and it can put your body into that status of diet damage long term. And Mark, you were asking about like how long could that last? The studies
Mhm.
show that it leaves a lasting imprint on your metabolism. Even an 8-week diet, like the one that Andrea was describing, the very low calorie diet, 8 weeks of that, researchers found 16 months later, the metabolic hormones never returned back to normal.
Wow.
And I mean, you figure that I know that's crazy, but you know, look, I grew up in an era of like it started, you know, with 17 magazine, which you don't read when you're 17, you read it when you're like
Right.
10. And, you know, you start reading that, and there's always a diet to follow. And then you start that and you do that diet or whatever, you cut it out and you follow it. And then you do the next one, that's the grapefruit diet. And then the next one, you know, is the hot dog diet. And the next one is the cabbage diet. And then the next one is, you know, whatever. And you do that over 20, 30 years. And now, like, I mean, not everybody gets to be like me, but everybody who's done all those diets, it can become a serious obesity problem by the time you're 40. And you're like, how did I get here? How did this
Mm-hmm.
happen?
Yeah.
And then we have a problem in the country of, you know, all these people with pre-diabetes. And it's really, it has to stop somehow.
I love how, Dr. Cooper, you said the brain can't trust you after you mistreat it. And what a beautiful way to look at our brain now, because I think there's a larger discussion to be had that, like, somebody's trying to lose weight and trying to get, more in shape. And they'll say, okay, I'm only going to eat at 8 in the morning, and then I'll eat at 4 p.m. And you're a big believer in listening to your body when it tells you you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And so talk to people about the importance of fueling your body when you intuitively feel like it needs fueling. I think that's a foreign concept to a lot of people, and it feels wrong to people who are trying to lose weight.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, there is a whole movement called intuitive eating, and that does focus a lot on listening to your body. One of the issues with people who do have metabolic disruptions is sometimes their body cues really are difficult for them to interpret. So it's not as clear
Uh,
cut. But it is important to think about our brain as a really sophisticated laboratory, and it's constantly assessing the chemicals that are circulating, which include our nutrient availability and hormones that regulate our metabolism. But it's also keeping an eye on what we're actually thinking about doing all the time. So, say we're about to go run a mile, and we know that we're going to go run a mile, and we're thinking about it, but we didn't have breakfast. And so now it's looking at the chemical environment in our system in terms of hormones and nutrients and saying, okay, there's not quite enough of that around. And now this person, my host here, is thinking about going and running a mile. So I've got to really start turning those dials down, 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 and conserve energy, or else they'll starve to death. And so Part of it is that I think that we really need to go beyond just our intuition about eating. And we need to also think about something called mechanical eating, which is providing consistent fueling throughout the day on a regular schedule, whether you're really hungry or not, because you can't always trust the hunger and satiety cues. Those can be altered when you have metabolic dysfunction. And so I think getting on a good schedule is the best way. And then sometimes that actually trains your body's cues to kick in at the right times and the right intervals. And then you can trust that a little bit more.
Wow. Thank you for setting me straight, because that's a misconception that your body knows best. But what you're saying is that your body is kind of like that car going down the road, and you've got to keep fueling it throughout the day. In terms of eating, Andrea, what has Dr. Cooper taught you about eating and the best way to continuously fuel the body?
Always have a fat, a carb, a protein with every meal. Like you can't just have one or the other, which that part's kind of hard. Um, and the other thing that was really eye opening, because I think so many times you hear, um, don't eat late at night. That's really bad. And she's like, well, if you're hungry at night, that's not the worst thing because it means that your body is telling you that you're kind of hungry at night. And that means that all night long your body is starving and you're going to wake up really starving. That's not a good thing. So if you want to eat late at night, because I tend to stay up late, um, keep eat something at night. That's okay. Your hours are different from other people's hours. That's all right. So that was like, oh, okay. I am hungry later at night. So that was actually a case where I was actually listening to my brain.
So, Dr. Cooper, I guess what you're telling us today is that we need to kind of get in a regular schedule, a pattern of eating. We've got to mix carbs, fats, proteins with each of these little meals. What's the spacing, would you say, of these meals throughout the day?
There's a little bit of wiggle room, I think, but if we really want to keep our hormones in proper balance, then probably I wouldn't go more than 3 hours while you're awake during the day without eating something. There are some exceptions for people with like really kind of strong diabetes. In diabetes, you can kind of extend it to about 4 hours because it takes longer for the blood sugar to come back, settle back down to normal. But that would be people with diabetes that's not under good control. But I'd say, yeah, every 3 hours throughout the day. And then we also don't like people fasting overnight more than 10 hours, adults.
So, that late night snack is not a bad thing if you're feeling kind of
Right?
hungry,
No,
right?
you probably need it.
It's a good thing.
So, Dr. Cooper, one thing that you've been doing now is you've developed a training program for doctors and healthcare providers to help them learn more about metabolic dysfunction. So, what are you teaching those healthcare providers when it comes to calories in, calories out? And I'm guessing you've had some pushback over the years on this one.
I've had so much pushback over the years on this. You can't even imagine. And it really pushes people's buttons when they have to think about this. But I'm so excited. I'm with a wonderful group now that we're taking through a training program. And the program's really starts out with reframing the issue of diabetes, which is obesity and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and just trying to create a new way of thinking about that condition. And I think from there, we can explain how the metabolism works. And that gives these providers a lot of confidence to really talk to their patients and other providers about the decisions that they make in their treatment process.
So, I'm guessing a lot of physicians out there are still operating under this calories in, calories out model. What would you say to a physician listening right now who still kind of is holding on to that?
Yeah. Well, I think the majority are still operating under that paradigm. But I think if they could ask themselves, really listen to your patients, listen to them and their experiences, and don't assume that they're not telling you the truth. They are. And then you'll have to try to explain how what they've experienced could be reality at the same time that the calories in, calories out would be a reality, because the two are in conflict. When patients tell you, I've done this, this, and this, kind of as Andrea has explained, and yet I'm back in the same position that I always was, or even worse, you've got to be able to take that in and try to come up with a better explanation than what we have provided in the past. So I think that I would just encourage them to get into it and really get into the field and really listen to the patients, roll up their sleeves and try to solve the problems. And they'll come to the awareness that the calories in, calories out really needs to be something of the past. And we need to move beyond that now and focus more on metabolic science to solve these problems.
Andrea, what was that like when you had those discussions with doctors over the years when you were trying to lose weight?
Well, I think most of the time they just would say, well, you just have to eat less, exercise more. I mean, seriously, that was pretty much the only answer that they would have. And they might have had some kind of crazy diet for me to go on, but it was always like, you're obviously eating way too much.
Hmm.
And I'd say, no, that's not really what's going on. And they would just throw up their hands. I mean, there was never, ever something discussed where it was a metabolism issue, ever. That was never brought up until I started talking to Dr. Cooper, ever. So I think that that's why when I started working with Dr. Cooper, it was like this, it was sort of like the heavens had opened and it was like, what? It's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't have to go on some sort of diet where I just eat cabbage. What? Like it was just a crazy thing. And to not feel starving and to to like not be thinking about what am I not going to eat tomorrow, that was it was kind of mind-blowing, especially the first year. It was really crazy.
Okay, so if we've learned anything from this episode, calories in, calories out is a myth, doesn't work for everyone. If you deprive your body of calories through diets or other means, fasting, you can do what's called diet damage, and then your brain doesn't trust you. So, and I think the other thing that we really want to leave those of you listening with is that I know some of you listening have maybe struggled your whole life trying to lose weight, and maybe you've been told that you've just been eating too much. But what we are trying to do is offer hope to explain that there's a scientific reason for that struggle, and there's a scientific way to treat it. And that's what this is all about. We're giving people hope. We're treating people with the best science. Dr. Cooper is, and there's light, as Andrea said, at the end of the tunnel. So that's it. Calories in, calories out. We covered it. Andrea Taylor, Dr. Emily Cooper, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is Fat Science for this week.
And we like to say it's no diets, no agendas, just science to make you feel better.
I'm Mark Wright. Thanks for listening to Fat Science with Dr. Emily Cooper, a Work P2P production. New episodes drop every Monday. If you've enjoyed the conversation, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. This production is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Join us next week for another episode dedicated to the science of why we get fat. No diets, no agendas, just science that makes you feel better.